So it's not just me or Maren McKenna talking about a post-antibiotic era. It's the head of the World Health Organization, Margaret Chan. So a few years ago, she said, a post-antibiotic era means medicine as we know it isn't the same anymore. It's changed. What does she mean by that? Well, how many of us have had one of these things? How many of us have had, or at home, have had a spouse or yourself have a C-section? I think statistically, maybe 1 in 4, 1 in 3 women who give birth have a C-section. Well, could we do C-sections if we couldn't be assured that there would be an antibiotic to treat any infection that might come about? Could we do transplants? Could we do chemotherapy for cancer patients? All of these things are often, not always, but often complicated by infection. As a doc, I'll tell you that if you think the risk is too high, you just won't do a procedure. You won't recommend it. It would be bad medicine to say, hey, I'm going to put you through this procedure, even though there's a very high risk you're going to get an infection that I can't treat. Well, or just don't do the procedure. Don't get a knee replacement. Don't get chemotherapy. Don't get a transplant. That's what a post-antibiotic era looks like. It's an era where these things are no longer possible because it's too dangerous to do them, because we no longer have drugs that will work if your surgery gets complicated by an infection. So in that post-antibiotic era, a lot of these things are off the table. Now, could you be in a car accident, have some sort of traumatic injury? You're in the ER, you're in the OR, and and it's very likely in that sort of trauma situation that you're going to get an infection, very likely. So they're going to treat you, they're going to do the best they can because they don't really have a choice. There's no choice involved if you're in a horrible accident or if you're in battle. So in that situation, we're going to continue to do what physicians and others have always tried to do. They're going to do their best, but it's going to be less effective. Why worry indeed? Well, there was a pre-antibiotic era, right? Before Alexander Fleming. We didn't have these drugs. My grandfather was a doctor. I never met him. I asked my dad, what was medical practice like in the 1930s? He said quite honestly, they really couldn't do much. And I'm sure that's not true, but parts of it are true. I think by that he meant that there were no antibiotics, right? Their phrase, if a kid came in with a walking pneumonia, you know what they would say? Tincture of time. Okay? That's what they would say to the parents. And what that means is, let's just wait and see. Maybe they recover, maybe they don't. Community pneumonia, 1 out of 3 deaths. 1 out of 3 people with a walking pneumonia died. For something like a cardiomyelitis, somebody with an infection in the heart, or meningitis, an infection of the brain, more like 80 to 100% of people died. Skin infections, little impetigo or some kind of staph or strep infection in the skin, 1 in 10 died. Today, those seems like nuisances, right? You get a little skin infection, you go to the clinic, they give you something, it's gone. Back then, people worried, and with good reason. So in a post-antibiotic era, we probably wouldn't be back to the pre-antibiotic death rate, but we're going to be somewhere in the middle. We're going to have more problems. So I promise, this is discouraging, but I'm going to tell you, I've got to, just like Netflix, I got to get you really kind of worried and engaged before I give you the good news, before we hit the other side. So bear with me. Why worry? Because this isn't just our problem. This isn't just a problem on Long Island or in New York. or in the United States. This is a global problem. Why? Because these bacteria travel. They travel in the plane, they travel in the air, they travel in the water. They travel. So if you get resistant infections in India, eventually they're going to make their way here. There's no way to prevent it. If you get resistant infections in China, same thing. So it's all of our problem. And globally, I told you that the estimate of the deaths in the US now are about 23,000, maybe higher, maybe as many as 150,000 a year. Well, the UK government commissioned a report, and a few years ago, one of the things that report did was to try to come up with a global estimate. And they looked out a ways. They said, what's the world going to look like in 2050? So, you know, that's getting closer than it used to be, right? We're already 21, that's 2 decades away. They said we could have 10 million global deaths a year by 2050 from superbugs. And the cost to all of us collectively could be $100 trillion. Now people said, like, oh, that's an exaggeration. They're trying to scare people. Well, damn right they're trying to scare people. Because even if it's not 10 million, what if it's only 5 million? A lot of deaths. What if it's only $50 trillion? It's still going to affect you and I and everybody. So we're not doing enough now. Should we be doing more? Absolutely. This is why. So the costs are not just hospital costs. That's a big piece. But you get an infection that lays you out or lays your spouse out for weeks, months, maybe permanently with a disability. What's that going to do to your income? It's time off of work. But then there are all those costs. There's costs from these resistant superbug infections. They put you in the hospital more than your run-of-the-mill infections. You're sicker. You need more treatment. It takes longer to get better. There actually are more infections. It's not just that the same number of infections happen, but they're more serious. You actually get more infections when there are resistant bacteria around us. And you know, they're here on your cushions. They're in the airplane. You know, I flew in yesterday. One of the places on the airplanes with the most bacteria is on the trays, on the meal trays. More than in the bathroom, believe it or not. That's what they found. So bacteria are everywhere. We're not going to get rid of bacteria. They're a part of this world. All we can do is to try to keep their levels of resistance down. So, all these costs together, both the direct treatment costs and all these indirect costs, the CDC thinks that maybe that's costing us $20 to $55 billion a year. You know? So what else could we be doing with that $55 billion a year? How much infrastructure could we build? You know, how many schools could we support? Tons. The world estimate, of course, is a lot higher. Oh, let me back up a second. So this looks like the first picture, right? We kind of think that this is our world. I mean, we don't really say it, but we kind of think it is. It's not. It's the bacteria's world. We live in their world. They were here before us. They're going to be here long after we're gone. It's their world. There's a lot more of them. In your gut, just in your gut, trillions of bacteria. Can multiply that by however many people there are on the planet, however many animals there are on the planet, gazillions of bacteria. Many of those are resistant. So they're everywhere. Again, there's no way to avoid them, but the main thing I want to say is, you know, maybe Madonna would have sang this. She would have said, we're living in a bacterial world, right? I won't sing it for you, but maybe she wishes she said that. I don't know. But we are living in a bacterial world. Let's think about the gut. We need bacteria. We can't digest. We can't be healthy without bacteria. And this is a hot topic now, the microbiome. Who's heard about the microbiome? Super hot topic, right? In medicine. We're still figuring out what that is and how it impacts us. But one thing we know is that there are people with a healthy microbiome, people with a good mix of bacteria in their gut, and then there's people with not such a good mix. And a lot of factors go into that, mainly your environment. So in fact, this study found that what actually creates your gut flora, your gut bacteria, is not your parents, it's not your genetics, it's the environment. It's what you eat, where you live, what you've been exposed to, if you change your diet, how many antibiotics you've taken. These things can all impact on your bacteria, and they can turn a healthy microbiome, a healthy set of gut bacteria, into an unhealthy set of gut bacteria. We're in a bacterial world. I'm not a bacterial girl, though. That's how the lyrics go, right?